Hello, Internet. Today I got to talk to one of my drum teachers at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Lucerne, Switzerland, where I'm currently studying jazz. He has been a major influence on generations of drummers for 3 decades now. In our conversation, he shared some valuable insights on drumming, timing, and practice. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and now I give to you Marc Halbheer. All right, Marc, thank you so much for being here and talking to me. I'm very excited about this interview. Let's just real quick, could you give me and the audience maybe a brief overview of your musical career, just so that we know who we're actually dealing with during this talk?
For sure. Thanks for having me for this interview, first of all. And so, I started playing music at a very young age when I got the ukulele from my neighbor for my 5th birthday. And then I started singing and learning songs from the Swiss songwriter Mani Matter. And that was like my first introduction to music. Then at a very young age, my mother's family is from the mountains. And in the old days, in those mountain resorts, when people went skiing, in almost every restaurant, there was a little band. And I remember one of my first memories is with 3 or 4 years, we had coffee and I was sitting next to the floor tom of the drummer. And obviously I was watching him like really excited. And then at some point he gave me a brush that I could tap on his floor tom while they were playing. And that was like, I guess, the initiation of my love to the drums. And then I always wanted to play the drums. But my parents at this time, they didn't think that drums was a valuable instrument. So they said, first you have to learn a real instrument. And they tried to force me to play piano, classical, of course, and stuff like that I didn't really enjoy. So at the age of 12, I was really ill and had to spend 3 months in the hospital. And then my parents were trying to find a school that I could continue in the normal program. And fortunately, they found the school of the father of Martin Tillman, that maybe we talk about him later. That was a very musical environment. And there were some drums. And so they allowed me to play the drums finally. And also they organized a drum teacher without my parents knowing. So I could start some lessons and could practice. And then after about 3 or 4 months, they told my parents, well, now your son is playing the drums. And they couldn't really do anything against it anymore. So
there's no more escaping the drums.
Yeah. So from then on, that was it. I just started to play as much as I could during my college years, although I had a drum set and a little room where I could practice, but I was only allowed to practice 1 hour a day because we were not living in a house. I mean, we were living in an apartment, and there was just this little room somewhere where I could put some drums. And because of the neighbors and whatever, I was only allowed to play 1 hour a day. So when I finished college, then of course I was kind of free to do whatever. I went to work so I could finally buy a better drum set, cleaning cars and stuff like that.
What age were you during the college years?
In Switzerland, college years are between 16 and 20 or 15 and 19.
Okay.
So I must say that in college, I had a great music teacher. I mean, he was a classical guy, but he was open-minded. I had to play the flute because drum sets still at this time I mean the
Mm-hmm.
classical flute, not the recorder. But the drums didn't exist in the school. They still thought that's like crazy, and they wanted classical stuff. But my music teacher was very open-minded, and he understood that I'm really interested in music, and so he gave me a lot of free time to practice. We had a little school band where I could play the drums. So there, this guy, Karl Scheuber was his name, he really helped me to fulfill my dreams, and he gave me a lot of space to also play the drums unofficially, though. But and my highest music diploma was my degree in flute at the end of the college, which I did actually very well. But anyway, so after this whole period, I really just wanted to play the drums, and finally I got a good drum set. I found a little rehearsal room in Zurich that was at this time really difficult to find, actually. And then I just started to practice, and like crazy. Went to listen to a lot of concerts. I mean, I had my first bands at this time. We did a lot of little concerts wherever we could. Also, I had a duet with a great piano player. We played parties to make money and that kind of thing. But for my parents, they didn't allow me to go to a music school or to a college. So I had to go to the university and finish. Today, that would be kind of a bachelor degree in law. So I had to go to law school.
It's hard to imagine seeing you in law school.
Well, that's why I went to law school, because I had some friends that did it, and they said, you never have to go. You just have to study the books, and then you can pass the tests, and you never really have to be there. So that's
you
why
don't have to be present.
Yes, that's why I did this. And of course, for my mother, she thought I go to the university every morning, but of course I went to the practice room and practiced. And then 2 years later, of course, I had to sit down for 5 months and really memorize all these books. So I passed those tests, but I was never there. I went to practice all the time. And then I passed those tests, and after this, the agreement was, if I pass the first exams, I mean, like kind of what would be a bachelor today, then I'm free to do whatever. So that was about when I was going to be 23 years old.
Okay.
I worked hard all these previous years to save some money. And then after I passed those exams at the university, I went to Los Angeles.
Okay. And at that point, where was your drumming level? Like, did you already feel comfortable with your skills?
Yes, I practiced so much. I mean, between 19 and 23, I spent 10 hours a day practicing. And after practicing, I went to listen to concerts. We had a great jazz club in Zurich, and everybody came to play there. And the owner of the club, he was really helpful. He liked the young musicians, so usually in the second set, he let us in for free through the back door if there was some free space. Yeah. So usually I spend the whole day practicing, and then when I came around to the second set in the club, I was there at the back door waiting until we could get in. And we had some a little community of young musicians, and a lot of times after the concerts, we went again to the practice room and tried to imitate what the guys played and stuff. And I listened to a lot of records. One of my jobs that I had during this time was at the CD shop.
Okay.
And I worked there every Saturday morning. And after a few weeks, the owner didn't come anymore on Saturday morning because I was kind of used to what I had to do. So I brought my little tape recorder, my Walkman, And in the mornings before
You
he got
stole all the
there,
music.
I recorded all the records, and so I had all the standards and all the good records on cassette, and listened, played along, and studied, and so I was totally crazy about it. And so but one thing I refused to do was reading. I thought reading is only for the guys that don't feel it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And since I was so forced to play classical, and I didn't like it because of the reading and stuff, so I just refused to read. I never learned how to read, not even on the flute. I memorized everything, did everything by ear. And so that's the only thing I didn't know, how to read. But I played a lot until I left to Los Angeles.
Yeah, because it seems like a really like old age already to get really involved into one instrument. Like I remember I started when I was 9, then the like real fire for drums kicked in when I was, I think, like 12, 13. And then I practiced a lot, but like starting with like 18, 19 to like really practice seems like a late point.
I started to practice when I was maybe 14, but only 1 hour a day, because I wasn't allowed to play more than 1 hour a day.
Maybe that limitation was something good, because you couldn't just mess around. You actually had to practice and make the best of that hour.
Well, I mean, that's what I always, I mean, people ask me, I mean, the thing is, at this time, I didn't really have a teacher. I mean, I had a few lessons with a New York guy that came to play sometimes in Switzerland. And whenever he was in Switzerland, he called me and he came to the house and showed me some rudiments and stuff. But I didn't have a teacher, really. So what I did is playing along to records all the time. I just played along with records, and I did some rudimental practicing from the material that this guy gave me, but I played along to records all the time. Okay. And my technique probably with 18 was pretty bad, but somehow my musical formation, listening to music a lot and playing to records all the time, I mean, that somehow I think was okay. And I sang in a choir since I was like 14, and I improvised on the piano. I mean, we had instruments at home. I had a piano, I had a guitar, I had my flute, and I played a lot, but just whatever I wanted, not
not dedicated practice.
Yes, I just improvised all the time, which was pretty annoying for my mother or for my parents because they didn't like what I played. But and I listened to records and even tried to play stuff on the piano and on the guitar. I sang a lot of songs. I was in the Boy Scouts and we sang all the time. And since I was the only one that had some kind of rhythm, I played the guitar. I mean, those 3-chord songs, that's not really difficult, but it was music.
Okay.
And then with 18, 19, I really started to practice technique and everything. But still without teacher. I'm lucky that I grew up in Zurich, and we had Jojo Meyer there, who was a few years older than me, but of course already at this time he was technically perfect. So I heard him a lot, and also on the sessions, we had a lot of jam sessions and stuff. He was always around, so I was just copying whatever I could.
Did you ever interact with him? Like, did he ever show you something, or were you just always watching?
Well, we talked a lot, we hung out a lot, we had drinks and stuff, but not really as a teacher.
Yeah.
But mainly by watching, listening, and I almost every day I went to listen to a concert. I mean, in this club. That was actually really happening at the whole Zurich.
Which club was that?
Was called Bacillus.
Bacillus. Is that still
Uh,
around?
I mean, that was no. I mean, no, it died. But I mean, what we have in Zurich now is the Moods.
Okay. Yeah.
That was like the successor of Bacillus,
Ah,
but the Bacillus no doesn't exist anymore.
yeah.
But the guy really helped the Swiss scene and or the Zurich local scene. He let us in on all the concerts without paying.
And that was mainly what kind of music? Mainly jazz or all kinds of music?
No, it was a jazz club,
Jazz club.
but the guy was open. So I mean, there was from John Abercrombie to whoever. I mean, all the hip people came to play there, and then there was a happening Zurich Jazz Festival that was always in the fall, and he was part of the organization. Although that was more like experimental stuff. Cecil Taylor and all these crazy people came to play there, but actually there we had a very funny thing. We always found a way to get in for free. The worst was when we had to go from the backstage where they had the load-in door to the stage. We had to take away all the chairs and everything that they tried to block the entrance. And then we ran across the stage during the concert and jumped into the audience just to get in for free because they locked everything and that kind of stuff. But we really wanted to listen to the music. So we always found a way to somehow sneak in.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. That's hard to imagine nowadays.
Yeah,
you know, like
with
with
possibility.
Yeah, and also like our generation, I don't think like we have the desire to attend a concert every night. You know, like we've got
because I mean
we could listen
definitely
to a concert every night on our cell phone, in bed, in our pajamas, right? We don't have the need to go out anymore and enjoy
that's
the music
definitely
live.
a difference for sure. I mean, somehow it's much easier to get the information today. You have all these books, you have all these videos, you have YouTube, whatever, Spotify and stuff. At this time, that was really different. I mean, those records I had, I mean, I copied them from the shop because records were expensive at this time. Yeah. And then the stuff that I really liked, I mean, I listened to those things that I wanted to copy millions of times. And I remember these cassettes, you know, you rewinded them and to find the right spot. I mean, it was not digitally able to, you know, to loop and stuff. So after hundreds of times of listening, you had to make a copy of the tape because the tape was going to break.
Yeah.
So you had to make a copy of the tape again and stuff, and so that's. But the few things that you got out of it, maybe not as much as you guys get today, but those things I really knew afterwards because I really had to study it and listen to it millions of times to get it right and stuff. And this is somehow not like this anymore, and it's kind of a disadvantage because we really had to be able to separate the information, the good ones and the bad ones, or the ones you really like. Maybe it's a better way to put it. And then you just studied it until you really knew it. And today it's this separation of information for young people is much more difficult.
Yeah, it gets really, really hard. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here with my questions. We were at the point of you actually leaving Switzerland to go to Los Angeles, right? That was when you were like 23 years old?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. When I'm in 1998, in the August of 1998, I went to Los Angeles. Yes.
Why did you go there?
I started to listen to Frank Zappa when I was like 15, 16. And that was a big, big inspiration for me. I mean, of course, he had great drummers all the time. And just also as a writer and his ideas and his philosophy, whatever. And so I wanted to be in the city where all these musicians lived that worked with him, where he lives. And I just somehow wanted to be around and eventually, hopefully, meet some of these people to understand how they think, what they do. And that was Los Angeles. And that's why I went to Los Angeles.
What did you do there? Did you just go there and with your
I
drums,
went
with your cymbals?
and because the whole visa problem, I mean, it still exists. That didn't get really better. You had to somehow go to school.
Okay.
So you got a student visa and you could stay more than 3 months. So I was trying to find a school where you don't really have to study. I mean, study, yes, but not, like in an official academic program.
Yeah.
And this time, I mean, that school still exists. It's called Musicians Institute.
Okay, the one in Hollywood, right?
Yes. But at this time, there were some of the best teachers at this school, like Ralph Humphrey, that he was one of the Frank Zappa guys, and then Gary Willis, Scott Henderson. I mean, for a lot of people, those are fusion musicians today, but I mean, they were incredible players. And so actually, it was a good school. Later, they sold it to the Japanese, and it became a real rock school, just a money-making machine. It really changed. But at this time, a lot of the great players were there. They had a big band there that every Tuesday was at school and stuff. But it was not an academic program. It was really a playing school. And that was actually for me great because I got to work and learn from some of these great teachers. But you didn't have to do any other thing than just playing.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted.
How long was the program?
The program was 1 year.
Okay.
It was only a 1-year program, and it was great to meet, of course, other musicians from all over the world. And I went to school, and since I had a lot of experience playing, I mean, maybe I have to say one thing. I wanted to play, of course. I went to Los Angeles and I wanted to play. And of course, I got informed from other people how the situation is there. And so I knew in Los Angeles, you need a car and you need an instrument. If you want to play those two things, it's the most important thing. Otherwise, you don't work. So the first thing I did, actually, the second day I arrived, was buying a car. And the third day I bought a drum set.
Oh, interesting. With all the money you had saved up from...
Yes, I worked many jobs, and we played a lot of little gigs, like these party gigs that I played with my friend. And we made, I mean, yeah, I could save some money. And of course, I didn't spend anything at this time because I was just practicing, and we could get in for free in these concerts. I still lived at home, so I was just saving money for that trip or that stay in Los Angeles. So, and that I had a car, I had a drum set, and then I started school. And 2 weeks after I was at school, through a bass player that was at school that heard me playing in some workshop, I had my first gig in Los Angeles. Went really fast, and then I, of course, tried to do it well and be prepared all the time. So I started playing very, very, very soon. I mean, 2 weeks after I arrived, I had my first gig. And then I played a lot. Just most of the times, I mean, we played like 5 times a week in bars, of course, smaller places. And then I met some of the great musicians and some older musicians, really experienced ones, that they understood that I really want to learn. And even though I didn't have the experience, they took me along and they showed me, they told me what to do. And so that those were my main teachers, actually. I mean, some drum teachers at school, but my main teachers were these guys that took me along to the shows and to play.
Interesting. And did you stay any longer than just a school program?
Yeah,
Or did
yeah.
you just stay
Then
for that 1 year?
no, I stayed longer. I overstayed. I mean, after you finished some kind of school, they allow you to stay 3 months, but this you could extend for another 3 months.
Okay.
Then I had to leave the country. Also, I needed to make some money because sometimes, I mean, those small gigs in LA, they don't pay a lot. So I went back to Switzerland once for 2 months. At this time, it was easy in Switzerland to get some job just for 2 months. And then I went back and forth. And once they even deported me because I didn't have a valid visa. But then somehow I could fix it. And 3 days later, I was back. And so I stayed overall until the end of 91.
Okay.
And then it was really difficult this whole legal thing was difficult. If you wanted to get a green card, you needed at least $20,000 and a lawyer, and it was really complicated.
Did you even want to stay? Like, would you have wanted to stay longer?
It's a good question, actually. I mean, I guess if the green card thing would have been much easier, I would have had stayed. But since this whole thing, I mean, I got also studio work, but since I wasn't able to join the union because I didn't have a green card and stuff, I did some stuff. And a friend of mine gave me his name. I mean, he officially would play on the record, but let me play just so I could get the experience. But all that kind of stuff, I got to record and stay in some of those legendary great studios and play with some great players, but it was always difficult with all these paperwork and stuff. So I kind of had a little bit enough of that. But I guess if whole paperwork would have been easier, maybe I would have stayed.
Yeah. Did you also like the lifestyle? I mean, I know the States pretty well, and for the Swiss culture, the American culture is pretty different. Especially LA, where you do everything with the car. It's a big city, but it's a very spread out city. The food's different. The people are different. Did you feel comfortable?
Really the typical Swiss person. I never was. I never felt so Swiss anyway. I had to travel all the time. I mean, still now I cannot stay in Switzerland for more than 6 months without getting claustrophobic.
And that must be killing you now, staying in that apartment.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm in Madrid at the moment, so and we are in prison, and but it's different here. People, I mean, in this crisis now, people are so the solidarity of people, even though I don't see them, is amazing. All the artists, everybody is supporting whatever they can, and this is the same in Los Angeles. I mean, those are big cities where almost everybody comes from somewhere, and there is almost no one that is from there. So everybody's used to help each other. This is this immigrant kind of mentality that for an artist and a musician, it definitely has an inspiring part. And at this time in Los Angeles, I mean, I just wanted to learn and to play music. So I didn't really care about anything else. I had a great car. I mean, an old car, was an old police car, but it was a good car. I had my things set up in the car so I could do my exercises with the sticks when I was stuck in traffic. And what I really liked about Los Angeles, and I always kind of didn't like so much in Switzerland, is that in Switzerland, everything is timed to the minute. And since Switzerland is so small, you can do 25 things a day. Which has some problem because people are not centered. they run from one thing to the other, and at the end of the day, they think they did a lot of stuff because it's possible to do. But whenever they start something, they're already thinking about what they're going to do next. And to play music and to be centered, this is not such a good situation. And in Los Angeles, I mean, even at that time, now it's even worse. Now the problem is they cannot really even move anymore. But at this time, I mean, distances are so big. So, I mean, if you had a rehearsal in the morning and then maybe you had some recording in the afternoon and the gig in the evening, and then you had to eat something, and that was it. I mean, you couldn't do like more than 3, 4, maybe 5 things at the most in a day. And then you always had to sit in the car and drive an hour to the other place. And during this hour, you had time to think what you just did, and you had time to think what you're going to do next. Mm-hmm. So it was somehow, I actually liked this because it was much less stress and you could much more focus on what you were doing or what I was doing. And that was playing music. And I tried and to practice. And of course, then free time I had, I mean, also there we practiced like hell. We practiced together all the time whenever possible. And it was just about music. Everything was about music and there was nothing else. And this I really liked.
That sounds really good. And then, so at the end of 91, you came back to Switzerland because you kind of had to, kind of wanted to. And what did you get to do in Switzerland?
Well, I thought that I will go back to university and finish my law degree because I couldn't imagine in Switzerland that I could somehow survive.
Make a living playing, yeah.
In Switzerland, because in Switzerland, yes, as a drummer, I mean, it was not, I mean, you could play, of course, but to make enough money to survive was not really an option. But then I came home, and actually a couple of days later, I got my first job as it was a musical, but at least it was work, and I with real money and stuff. So I took this job, and then a couple of days after I started working in this musical, I got the call from the jazz school in Lucerne that was very new. I mean, it just started a couple of months earlier. And the guy that was supposed to build up this drum department realized that it is a lot of work and that he didn't want to take this responsibility. And since they remembered me from the projects I had in Switzerland before, and that I was in Los Angeles and that I'm back now and stuff. So, and although I was only 27 years old, they called me if I want to take this job to start this school or to build up the drum department. And since I came back from the States, and in the States, if somebody offers you a job, even if you don't know how to do it, and if it's a good job and they ask you, you just have, I was trained to say yes, you know, I mean, that's the American way. And if it doesn't work, you still can cancel or they can kick you out. But if it's something worth to do, you say yes. That's not really the Swiss mentality, of course. But so they asked me, I had no experience in teaching, but they asked me if I want to do it. At this time, it was a little bit different than today. The guy, the boss of the school at this time, he said, yeah, okay, so let's have lunch. And we talk about it. And then we had lunch and I had the job.
All right.
That was it. And
who was the other drummer that was also in charge of making the drum department happen?
There was no other drummer.
Oh, you were the only drummer?
Yeah, they just started. There was nobody, and also very few students. It was completely new. I mean, that kind of program in Switzerland didn't exist. Until then, there was only classical departments and the jazz school in Bern. But the official degree and stuff that just started right then. I mean, for drum set, it didn't exist before anything like this.
Yeah.
And there was nobody, nothing. Just they
You
said,
were all by
"Okay,
yourself."
here now, start do something," and that's how it was.
That was in 92.
I started in January 92.
Okay. So it's been 28 years. Is that correct?
Yes,
Wow.
28 years.
Been teaching for
many years.
That's a really long time.
Yes.
And then since then you've been in Lucerne teaching, and you've of course always had projects as well, musical projects with original music and music for other artists and stuff, right?
Right.
Mainly in Switzerland?
Well, no, not really, actually. Most of the stuff, I mean, partly in Switzerland, but most of the stuff that I did was somehow related to my time in Los Angeles with other artists that I met there. We started a trio at this time in Los Angeles with a great guitar player from Israel called Lior Yekutieli. He was actually, he still is one of the most talented musicians I ever met. And the Greek bass player, Panayotis Kyrtsoglou, that he's living in Athens now, and he's kind of doing what I do in Switzerland. I mean, a lot of the young players from his area, they studied with him. And Lior is a total freak. I mean, he just does his music. He didn't really want to do anything else. They actually, even Joe Zawinul called him for his band, and he didn't take the gig because it just didn't. It's one of these really freaky persons, but an amazing player. The band still exists. Actually, we had our 30-year anniversary.
That's Texit Music, is it that band?
Exit. The band is called
Exit. Yeah.
Exit. I mean, but the name of Texit is because it's a trio Exit. That's why.
Okay. Because I was on the website just recently, and yeah, it's called Texit.com. That's why. But it's
that
the
comes
band's
from
called
trio
Exit.
Exit. Because, I mean, we called it Exit in 1990. And then, of course, there were other trios Exit, and there is Exit Music and organizations called Exit. At this time, this all didn't exist. But the name of the website comes from trio Exit.
Yeah.
And we played a lot in the 90s with this band. And then also, I think in 92, just after I started school in Lucerne, because I was playing in Switzerland with a bass player called Heidi Kanzig, that he's also teaching in Lucerne. He recommended me for the Vienna Art Orchestra, that at this time was the main avant-garde big band in Europe. Then I got to tour with these guys and playing all these festivals, whatever, Paris, Berlin, I don't know what. I did this for 3 years and recorded with them and everything, and did a lot of freelance work in Switzerland. And usually when somebody got sick or when it had to be a reading job or something, that finally in LA I became a good reader. And so I did a lot of freelance work in Switzerland, but the interesting stuff actually usually was outside of Switzerland and somehow connected with LA or with the people I met in the Vienna Art Orchestra or other stuff. But during the 90s, I worked a lot also in Switzerland, doing whatever. Played like 150 to 200 shows every year.
While teaching.
And it was too much. I remember the day when I came home from teaching, and on my answering machine, that was still the time of the answering machines with these little cassettes and stuff. And I came home after one day of teaching, and I had like 46 messages on my little cassette player, and I was saturated with working, and I took this answering machine and threw it at the wall because I just now it's over, finished. I cannot no more. And so then I realized that I had to somehow slow down, be more selective with things, and that was a big experience. This throwing the answering machine to the wall.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. So now, 28 years later of teaching in Lucerne, looking back, has your approach to teaching evolved? Like if you compare the first couple of years to what you're doing now, has it changed?
Well, yes and no. I mean, my approach to the drums and to how I try to transmit the energy and my idealism and my excitement, that didn't change at all. Not even nothing. Of course, my methods, they changed, but not that much either. I try to avoid books. Of course, I use machines, I mean computers and all these tools that we have today. They didn't exist at this time. Since I've been a lot to studios, I kind of made the whole evolvement from complete analog to complete digital, which I learned all the tools. I have my little studio at home, whatever. I mean, because today that's how it is. If you don't know Pro Tools, if you don't know some notation software and Ableton Live and all this stuff, it's a little bit difficult today. But I mean, of course, those things changed. But no, my approach to teaching actually really didn't change much. I still try to avoid books. I try to show you guys reading, but all these books, I mean, there's so much bad information all over the place from people that do things that they never played. And so I'm fortunate that I played a lot, and I'm fortunate that my teachers were musicians, not so much even drummers.
Yeah.
And I try to show you guys music and not so much just technique. Of course, technique is very important because it definitely helps you to shape the music. But it's about the music and not about the surface of playing the drums. So, and this didn't change, not even one bit. And I guess that you guys realize that still, or even more than back in the day. I mean, my love to play the drums is just the main thing. I just love to play the drums and still. And somehow that's what I try to transmit, and then the rest comes after.
It's funny that you say that there's a lot of bad information out there with all the books available and stuff. I just recently published on my blog a post where I go on social media. I'm a big fan of social media and YouTube, Instagram, all those platforms. But I think there's too much bad information. Like nowadays, everybody can call themselves a teacher and a drum instructor. They can have a great video that looks great. They can have language that sounds smart. The audio can be great, but let's say they show you a certain technique and you just know it's completely upside down. Like if you and most of those videos are, their target audience is the beginner drummer. It's not the experienced professional drummer, right?
Yes,
so, and now as a beginner drummer, you watch those videos and you start just developing very, very bad technique or very narrow-minded views on music, and I don't know how you tune a bass drum. Let's say there's so many videos on how to tune a bass drum, and they show you how to do it, and they even call it the one way to tune your bass drum or something, and you're just stuck then for until you like actually go out and challenge yourself and your beliefs. You're just stuck with that one way of tuning your bass drum, right? I think that's
I totally agree.
the more.
I mean, what's
it's
yes?
not necessarily healthy to have this much access to this much information.
It's definitely completely unhealthy. And of course, what young players cannot really understand is that music, a lot of times, most of the times at least, is played in a band, in a room that usually has nothing to do with those studios where all these drummers do their videos.
Yeah.
And the thing that strikes me most is that a lot of these guys, you never see them playing in a band. When they do their videos, they usually play to the click track, which is very strange for me. I mean, I have nothing against the metronome. The metronome is a great tool to practice. But if you play some exercises and you record them and you put them out for the public and you do it with a click track, it's just so weird. And so those situations have nothing to do with playing music, and it's just it's a different thing, which I mean, yeah, it's okay, you know. I mean, everybody can do whatever they want, and somehow in the drumming community, or this whole drummer world became kind of a lifestyle almost, you know. This only exists with guitar players and drummers, I guess. I mean, also we have all these endorsements. It's really a business. There is magazines in every country, or these drummer magazines. I mean, you don't find a violin magazine or you know whatever. It's because drums are very attractive also to watch. You know, it's kind of a circus. And this is also great. I love this, you know. I mean, I have my circus parts on concerts where I do things and people are like, wow, and they ride like Halbheer with his 3 legs and 4 arms and I don't know what and stuff. That's okay. Just the small dose, you know. It's like feeding people. I mean, if you just feed them sugar all the time, I mean, they become sick, and that's what happens with these videos. They just feed them sugar, or sausage, or I don't know what. And if you just eat this, I mean, of course you become sick after a while. And that's the only problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really happy that I got stuck with drums, partly because the drumming community is so great, and it's in musical terms, like within the instruments, it's by far the biggest community, right? Like
for sure.
With all these events, there are just happening with drummers only, right? That's really amazing. But I also, in that same blog post I made about social media, I'm telling my readers to be more outspoken and more vocal when they see bad information. You know, like, and let's say on YouTube you see a video that's just bad. You know, you just know if a beginner drummer starts to practice like this or starts holding the sticks this way, I say we don't have to be nice anymore. Like, I mean, be correct, and your comment should be about the subject and about how you hold a stick, but we have to be outspoken. We can't just accept every opinion out there, right? I think
I totally agree. Yes.
When we accept opinions that are just not valid, then it can be potentially harmful, right? Especially for beginner drummers.
Well, I mean, my experience, and this is sometimes, or not sometimes, it's usually really frustrating, more for the students than for me, because once you guys get to the school, you come with all these techniques that first we just have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And with a lot of stuff, we kind of have to start all over again.
Yeah.
And most of you guys practiced and studied for 10 years or even more when you finally get to our school. And the first year we basically spend to change things, to get rid of bad habits and really start to get the good habits. Fortunately, usually all of you understand why, and it's never really a question. But this comes from all these misleading informations. It's not only technique, but the technical stuff, of course, is the most frustrating, because it's the one that takes the most time to change. But then also a lot of misleading information about styles and how to play whatever, and so I got used to it. In the beginning, I didn't really understand, but then I got used to it, and I know that usually the first years with 95% of all the students, the first year is just to put you on the right direction. That's how it is.
Yeah, I remember the first semester for me, the first part of the first year was actually quite hard on my ego. You know, it's you're attacking my ego by telling me that my technique that I've spent the last 15 years on practicing every day, it's okay, but it's not what it should be or what it could be. And it's always like giving feedback like this. It's always like, all right, open up your heart, and I'm just gonna poke it a little bit. You know, it just doesn't feel good. But once you get past that ego barrier, you just improve, and you open yourself up to many possibilities that you didn't have before. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And this is the difficult part for the teacher, I guess, to somehow, I mean, I have to hurt your ego in a way.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
But to do it in a way that still is motivating. And fortunately, since I've played a lot, and certain things I can show you when I play, you see, that's the way you do it. And if you do it like this, then it just sounds better.
Yeah.
And so if you have these reflections of a guy sitting next to you really playing it, then usually that's how I can get you guys without frustrating you guys too much. But this is this is the hardest part for a teacher.
Yeah. To get through that barrier of the student's ego just shutting down and excluding all the information.
I don't succeed with everybody. Some guys, then they just leave, you know, they cannot put up with it, and they stop, which is better, of course, because if you cannot get across this barrier, it doesn't make sense anyway. But of course, we try really hard to motivate you guys and somehow to fix all these things. And then afterwards, and this is, you remember very well, I tell you all the times, once this is okay, then you can go on for the rest of your life, and it just gets better. And it's like this. I have so much experience now teaching that I really can guarantee that it's like that. And it's like that.
And so we've been talking about the students. Have you seen them develop over the years? Like during those 28 years you've been with in that school in Lucerne, have you seen them evolve? Like not this one student, but like the generations of students. Have they been different in the 90s from what they are now? Like, does my generation have more misconceptions about music or technique or drums than they used to have in the 90s or 2000s?
I mean, the misconceptions, unfortunately, I guess, yes, because of all the things we just mentioned. The thing is that most of them just didn't have a concept maybe 25 years ago. So
they didn't have one at all.
Yeah. I mean, so it was kind of easier maybe back in the day, because a lot of guys just didn't have a concept. So you didn't have to destroy misconcepts and lead them to some new ones. You just had to start some concepts, which is definitely a lot easier. But the level from what you guys know and do is definitely higher now than
when we start school, we were better musicians than they were in the 90s.
Probably. I mean, knowledge wise, I guess the level definitely is higher somehow. But this misconceptions, definitely, they increased a lot. But once you know something about music, you accept the learning process, and that it's about what you just said, getting rid of your ego and just really start to learn whatever, but just to learn. Learning is, is anyway a positive process. I mean, if you learn, but some of these misleading concepts, they avoid you. They put a barrier on the learning.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to get rid of them. But once you accept that you're just learning like everybody else, and me too, I just do it longer. I mean, you remember this phrase, I use it a lot. The only difference is I just do it a lot longer than you, and that's about it. But if you are not in a good learning process, then you can study forever and it just doesn't get better.
Yeah.
And that's then why a lot of people get frustrated. But for sure, the level is higher, I guess. And yes.
Well, that's good to know. The practicing, we talk a lot about practicing and how we can practice more efficiently and not just waste 10 years on practicing the wrong technique, or just the whole process of practicing and learning, just to do it correctly or in a better way than one used to. How would you, let's say, divide up a 2-hour practice session on the drum set between like technique, repertoire, timing, exercises to improve your time, and not speed wise, but just like to make it steady, to have the subdivisions down and stuff?
One of the most or the biggest error, one of the biggest errors of drummers or all. Yeah, I mean, you asked about how to divide a practice session of 2 hours, and also you mentioned a few steps during such a practice session, and like technique, timing, and stuff. One of the biggest errors in the thinking is that you can improve your time doing exercises for improving your time. I don't really believe in this. I mean, your time, most of the guys, at least, that come to our program, at some point in their life, they probably had a pretty good time feeling. Because otherwise you wouldn't want to be a drummer. And actually, I guess everybody really actually, not only drummers, I mean, actually everybody has a natural feel of time. I don't believe in this. I mean, of course, some better, some worse and stuff. But if you watch people that are not handicapped in some way or another, when they walk around in the city, they always walk in time. I mean, people walk around in time.
That's a very good point.
That's how it is. And I sometimes, when I'm stuck in traffic or I don't know what, I even try to find out what's the speed they're walking in. And most people walk in the ballpark of the heartbeat, which is somewhere around 60 beats per minute, or if they're stressed and have to hurry, it's faster and stuff. But everybody walks in time, basically. I mean, so through miseducation in schools and whatever, I mean, all this talking about timing makes just to have bad time at the end, and all these techniques and stuff. And of course, once you start to work on your technique, it's natural that your time somehow gets upside down for a while, at least. So the worst thing is to practice fast, really, before you're really able to play the thing slow and nicely with the correct movements. Bad timing usually comes from wrong movements. And so that's, I think, the biggest mistake. to correct those slow movements and make them perfect, you have to practice slow, and of course to use the metronome and stuff. But also most people, they just put the metronome on the quarter note, which doesn't help at all. It's actually even worse, because especially in Western music and in Western Europe, I mean, we know where the quarter note is. And if you just put the quarter note, you never lose time. I mean, and you maybe practice with the metronome for years and you still don't know that it's not correct, because you basically kind of are with the quarter note. But if you start to put the metronome on the middle triplet playing swing, or at least on the last triplet, or on 2 and 4, if you play straight stuff, if you put it on the offbeats of the 8th note, or even on the offbeat of the 16 notes and stuff like that, or on the dotted, or, you know, then you immediately realize what's going on. Either you're on the beat after one bar or so, or you just lose it. And those things, when you start to do it, you have to do it very slow. But it forces you to really understand where the time is, and then it's a lot is about wrong movements. If you don't do the right movements, your time is just never going to be good. So I believe that it's more a technique, and timing have a lot to do. Because if you do the wrong movements, then there is no time. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And so if you divide a practice session, I mean, also when I practice, and I still practice a lot, I do warm-ups, usually first for the hands, preferably on a pad, that I don't get distracted. And, you know, once you sit on the drums, it's so much fun. You just do some technical exercise, and 2 minutes later, you are doing whatever, which is great, of course. But usually I start with my hands on the pad. Then once I sit on the drum set, I do some stuff for my feet, sometimes only the feet, just to get warmed up with my feet. And then I do some coordination stuff just to get my engine warmed up. And if you have 2 hours, I mean, I would for sure do at least 15 minutes only hands and 15 minutes only feet, and then maybe another 15 minutes everything together, but still just warm-ups to get the body warmed up. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand that at the end, it's all the brain. You know, it's only brain. If the brain gets used to this kind of way of practicing, and the same stuff every day, not another exercise and another exercise and another exercise. So you have the feeling that at the end of the week you did a lot of stuff, which is a complete error. You know, I mean, our brain doesn't work like this. Our brain wants to do the same thing and the same thing again and again, to learn, to learn, to learn. There is this old Latin expression that is 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Repetitio studiorum mater est, which means repetition is the mother of learning. So if you do different exercises, even if you do them slow, if you do a different exercise every day, it just doesn't do it. It just doesn't help. It's about doing the same thing every day. And even the best would be to do the same thing every day at the same time. This is for most people not possible, but our brain works like this. You know, if you do your paradiddles for 15 minutes every day at 10 o'clock, it's easier for your brain, and it remembers what you did yesterday and stuff. So that's a big mistake, to just try to get through some books as fast as possible, because then you feel like you did a lot or something. It's the opposite. If you go through one exercise in 1 month, or even in 2 months, and do it slow and every day the same, you learn a lot more than the other way around. So that's really one of the biggest mistakes, I guess. And our brain, if you do warm-ups, and you do the same, and then you do it for 45 minutes, as I said, first hands, then feet, and then maybe everything together. The next day you do it, your brain says, oh, yes, this is what, I know this. This is what I did yesterday. Oh, I know how this feels. This is nice. I want to do it. It's comfortable. So if you do this every day and you do warm-ups, and then you start to practice more difficult stuff or new stuff, your brain is in this mind frame that, oh, it's nice. I want to do it. I want to learn. This is really what I like to do. I know how to do it. But if you do different exercises every day, just at the beginning, your brain says, oh, no, this is hard. This is so difficult. I cannot do this. This is too much for me. So your brain is in the opposite frame. It just doesn't want to learn. It says, this is too much. I just refuse. This is too much. I can't. It's kind of like warm-ups for sports, I mean, you have to do them slow. So your brain knows, okay, now it's coming this, it's fine. And then after, you can stretch your abilities because your brain is prepared. And otherwise, it's the opposite. And it doesn't get better, and it doesn't get better. And you practice, and you're frustrated because the other guy can do it, and you still cannot do it. Yeah. And so this is this. And then, I mean, if you do 45 minutes of warm-ups, or, I mean, maybe even an hour, whatever else you do goes much faster. And of course, you have to learn new stuff, but you have to repeat and repeat and repeat, and then do something new. And then the other philosophy for me in practicing is that I learned from Joe DiOrio, who was an amazing guitar player and a fantastic teacher in Los Angeles. And he said always, if you learn one thing every day, that's fantastic. And that's enough. Because if you learn one thing a day, along the year, you learn 65 new things, which is a lot during the year. But most people, they don't even learn one thing every day because they just practice wrong. And then you don't learn. So if you prepare your body and then you try to learn one thing every day, then you should be great and learn a lot.
Yeah. It gets very frustrating though, especially now with the whole social media and YouTube, Instagram and stuff, all those young drummers that are sharing what they're doing, how fast they are and stuff. It gets very frustrating when you say that repetition is the mother of all learning, because every day they show you a new lick. Every day they show you a new groove. There's you probably know no, you probably don't know Cyrus Vasiri. That's he's about my age, maybe a little younger. He has this concept where he shares a lick every day, 5 times a week, Monday to Friday, and you can subscribe to his website and stuff, and he calls it bite-sized drum lessons, right? And there it's something. I know you don't, and I would never subscribe to something like this, but I mean he's making enough money to survive, right? So, and that's just the opposite of what we just talked about. That repetition is king, and not learning something new every day. It looks like you're acquiring a lot of information, but it's short-term memory. It's you practice it in the morning, and in the evening you can play it, but in a month it will all be gone, right?
Probably. I mean, of course,
most likely
not everybody is the same, and some people have amazing abilities. I mean, when I was young and I talked about Jojo, I mean, I was really frustrated because I knew I will never, ever be able to play like that technically. And I'm still not. And I will never, I mean, this stayed like that. But that doesn't mean that you cannot play great music. And these guys, I mean, I don't know this guy, of course. I don't know if he plays in a band. I don't know what his music sounds like when he plays with people. I have no idea. A lot of these guys don't play in bands because they're just practicing at home and doing their videos, which, I mean, if he can survive and makes money with this and stuff, I'm great. I think it's great, but for me, it's like this sausage and dog thing,
Yeah,
It's
that
just,
thing
I
again.
mean, it's just sausage for the dog. And if the dog eats sausage every day, eventually he will die because he gets sick. But he will eat the sausage because the dog is like this. If you give him the sausage, he eats it, and then he will die.
Yeah, but
And if it works for this guy, I mean, it's really great for him, and he probably knows a lot of licks and stuff, and maybe this is really amazing. Maybe I once have to check it out, but and maybe it even works for a few guys. Some guys are very talented with their abilities, what their bodies can do and stuff, but most of them will definitely never succeed like that. And I mean, there's so many guys like Thomas Lang, who kind of started this whole thing almost and stuff. I don't know, he never plays really in bands. And the little stuff he does is really technical music, and of course it's impressive. But I mean, me personally, I would get really depressed like that. I want to play music. I want to share music with the audience. Music is something healthy. I want to spread this kind of thing and share it with the students and with the audience. And the feedbacks I get from audiences, sometimes even, they send emails or whatever after a gig and stuff. And it's a spiritual thing more than the technique and stuff. But the technique helps to, to get this across, of course. But I'm on a totally different line than those guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So we've talked a little bit about time already. And you always, when we talk about time, you always make the point that there's always something physical involved. There's always, like, when you make the reference to people walking on the street, or or when you talk about how technique really affects also your timing, because some movement, some stroke that you're making is just not working correctly, and it really affects your time. You're very big also on the left foot, and having the left foot do the quarter notes, even if you're not
eight
playing
notes
it,
more than also if you play swing, quarter notes.
Well, yeah, it
if you
depends
play
on
straight,
depending on the tempo, obviously. And I made the experience myself. I think in the beginning, when you told me to practice always with my left foot playing, I think my ego kind of shut down. And then once I opened myself up to the idea of really incorporating it to my practice sessions, I think my time definitely improved. Do you recommend keeping some sort of motion while playing to all instruments, or just drummers? Like us drummers, we have it easy because we have the hi-hat pedal right there, and we can make it with a sound or without a sound. But let's say a bass player or a singer or a guitarist, do you also recommend them to like keep tapping their foot, or to maybe dance or something?
well, I mean, you see, it's a big difference what kind of music you play, and especially if you play classical music, it's a totally different story because if you have a symphony orchestra and everybody's tapping time on the floor, that's definitely not going to work. But if you play groove music, that I mean, jazz and all these things are related to groove music, or to, I mean, in all our styles of music, that they come somehow or are related to dancing, and the basics of our styles, they come from dance music, even if it became very intellectual these days and stuff. But the basics, they come from dance music, from Africa. I mean, you know, and it's even from Asia, but it's kind of a lot of stuff is related to dance music. And so if you don't know how to move your body, it can never really dance, and nobody will be ever able to dance. I don't mean that we all have to be able to dance. I mean, I cannot really dance, you know, you don't want to see me dancing. But if you're not able to move your whole body coordinated in time when you play an instrument, I guess something is really difficult. Even if you're a trumpet player or a saxophone player, piano players, anyway, guitar players. And actually, I don't know any bass player that I played with that I feel really good time-wise that doesn't move his body in time. And I wouldn't know how to do this. I mean, it comes from the body. Time comes from the body. Mm-hmm. And if you're not able to coordinate your body with your instrument while you're moving, something is, in my eyes, is weird. And as you said before, you know, the thing with the left foot, most drummers, they can do a lot of stuff when they don't move their left foot. I don't say you have to always play time with your left foot, but if you find stuff that you can play and you cannot play it anymore while at least keeping a pulse in your left foot, it's like skiing with, you know, and skiing is with 2 arms and 2 feet. And of course, if you're handicapped, there are people that they can even ski great with only 1 leg, because their leg, for some sad reason, had to be taken off. But that's a different thing, you know. And it's about 4. I mean, drums is a 4-way coordination thing. And if one thing disturbs the other things, then you have to fix it. And I don't say you always have to play your left foot, but you have to be able to play everything with at least keeping the pulse in your left foot. Otherwise, something is wrong. Mm-hmm. And all the things you can do, you know, whatever it is, if you can do it, you can leave it away. If you don't want to hear it, you know. But if you cannot do it, you just can't do it. It's pretty simple, really. And if you want to leave something away because you don't want to hear it, or, I mean, because it sounds, a lot of times it sounds better if you don't do it or whatever, I mean, that's a totally different story. But if you can't do it, something is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. I watched a video a couple of days ago where a drummer talks about like Latin music and how to drum with a drum set and not with percussion, right? How to accompany a song with the drum set. And he shows you this groove, and he plays the groove, which sounds good. And then he starts explaining what he's doing, and he says, well, I learned this groove like this, and he's playing the clave with his left foot on the hi-hat. Mm-hmm. And he says, I learned it like this, and sorry, I just have to keep the clave when I play this groove because I can't do it any other way. I learned it like this, and now he didn't say it like this, but it sounded like, all right, I learned it like this, and now that's what I can do. Like anything out of this box, it's impossible.
Yeah,
like,
but you see,
I learned
exactly
the coordination with my left foot, my right foot and stuff, which is great. But he's got no capabilities that like exceed that
This is the
pattern.
problem. I mean, you know me, so I don't have to explain it to you, but this is the problem with all these drum books. You usually in these drum books, in the first 2 or 3 pages, the basic patterns are explained. Like, this is the clave, this is the cascara, this is the tumbao and stuff, and this is great. This is usually completely correct. And then they start to write and fill the book, because you cannot sell a book with 3 pages, of course. And then they put all these patterns, and then the student, he doesn't learn the first 3 pages. He goes to the interesting, I mean, they think it's interesting stuff, where everything is black and all these patterns and stuff. And so he probably had to practice quite a lot to get it done with the clave and stuff. And he learned this pattern and he practiced it for a couple of weeks, or I don't know how long. And then he's stuck in this thing. And he will never be probably able to play in a band like that, because nobody wants to hear this, because he cannot play the music. And so this is exactly the problem with all these drum books. And I remember very well, I mean, this clave thing now, it's not such an issue anymore. But when I was, back in the 90s, or in early 90s, that was really hip if you could play the clave in your left foot with playing Latin music. And there is a recording, Swiss guy that did a record, and it was kind of Latin, and I recorded a drum solo with the clave in my left foot. And I was so proud, that because I was in Europe probably one of the first ones that ever did it, and in Switzerland for sure. And I was so proud. But of course I knew the basics, and I could play also in other ways. And of course, the reaction from a lot of people, wow, you played a drum solo with the clave in your left foot and stuff. And yeah, okay. Then I never did it again, because I thought, okay, it's misleading a lot of people. And once in a while, I still play the clave in the left foot, just once in a while. But I would never actually. There are some guys that can really do it well, like Antonio Sanchez, or he's really advanced. But I stopped also teaching this before the basic coordination is really happening, because the result is exactly that the student goes to practice for weeks just to get this pattern together, and he can not play any music. And the thing is, with all these books, if you study the basics, this, everybody says it, and I just repeat it, but if you study the basics, then all of that stuff that's written in those books comes out by improvising on the basics. And if you really know the basics, you don't need to read all this stuff, because you start to improvise it, and it's the same at the end. And most drummers that learn from those books, they don't read the first 3 pages, and they don't practice the first 3 pages. They go to practice these lines. Now I did number 14, and so tomorrow I do number 15. With the result that at the end they cannot do anything, and they don't even know the basics. And this is really sad,
Yeah.
But that's the reality.
So you not only teach drums and rhythmic studies, you also teach. You also have band workshops, where you're like the band leader of students of a band. And in one of my blog posts, where I talk about what groove is, I make the argument that practicing time and practicing the ability of keeping one's time steady is important, and it's important for all instruments, not just for drummers or bassists, but it's also important that a guitarist or a pianist or even a singer can keep time. And so I think all those things are great, that they know what subdivisions are, that they know what maybe a medium swing feels like, or a up tempo where the BPM counts are more or less, all those things. But then I make the argument that I don't think it's a great thing the way we're currently teaching it in band workshops, where we keep telling everybody you have to keep time. To me, I don't think that if you're 5 band members and everybody has to keep time, you're going to have 5 different tempos, right?
Yeah, but that's not sure if I really understand the question right.
My point is that I think, let's say you give the main responsibility to the drummer and the bassist, and they really have to log in and they have to have the same opinion of where the tempo actually is. And now everybody else should just kind of like sit on top of them. And I think if everybody's busy thinking, I mean, there's an issue already. Like if you're thinking, you're not really playing. But thinking about their tempo and feeling like, okay, I'm in charge of keeping time, then it takes a lot away from their ability to really listen to each other and really like sit on the other's phrasing, sit on the other instrumentalist's tempo and stuff. I don't know what you think of it. I mean,
well,
that's my opinion at the moment. Maybe it will change.
I mean, there's many issues in what you say now, and many different questions. I mean, if I listen to it and if I understand it correctly. So I think there is a big confusion about this whole thing. First of all, if everybody has good time or learned how to have good time, then all of the things you are now describing or said about listening, about thinking and stuff, they're solved anyway. Because once you really understand what time is, that's when listening starts. Then you can start to listen, you know. And if everybody is experienced in time playing and they understand that this groove is maybe a little bit more laid back, or this is maybe like that, and if everybody understands it, then even if it's 5 people, of course you don't have 5 different tempos. Then that's only when you start to have the same tempo. And that's why it's so important that everybody can take the responsibility to be the time player. Everybody has to be able to do that, because otherwise it's just like 2 guys, maybe, as you said, the bass player and the drummer, they keep time, and the rest is searching all the time. And listening, to open up your ears, as you said, has a lot to do with thinking. And to open up your ears, you have to understand what's going on around you and everything that's going on around you. You have to understand if the other guy is rushing now, or is slowing down, or if he's playing a group of 5, or if he's playing quarter note triplets, or all this stuff. If your brain is not able to process this, your ears are useless completely. You just, it's one confusion after the other. And then you will never be able to stop thinking and just trust your ears. And there are, I guess, that's in an ensemble context, that's the biggest misunderstanding that happens. And also, this is a basic, I mean, one for me, I mean, I'm always talking from my personal point of view, but one of the biggest misinformations in jazz music is this whole accompanying interplay idea. It's interplay from the beginning. I mean, of course, I'm not the only one that says that, but in most books and most teachers, they're always talking about accompanying and soloists and stuff. I think that's a complete mistake to separate those things. It's interplay from the beginning. Of course, a lot of times the drummer is playing time more than the soloist.
Mm-hmm.
And the soloist steps out in front and stuff, but the interplay is still going on if the drummer is playing time and the soloist is playing the solo. And if there is no interplay between accompanying and soloist, to use those terms that everybody uses, it will not work anyway. I mean, it's an interplay from the beginning. And the interplay only starts if everybody understands what the other guy is doing. And even if the guy is rushing or slowing down or playing ahead of the beat, it doesn't mean that everybody then has to rush or slow down or play ahead of the beat or laid back or whatever. I mean, that's where the tension starts. And the tensions in music make it interesting. But you have to understand what's going on. Otherwise, you cannot build any tensions. Otherwise, then it's just not together. And when it's not together, it's because nobody understands what's going on. And if it's not together, it will never groove. And, I don't mean together like a sequencer, but those relations are happening. And these tensions, that you can create them or release them and whatever. And if you listen to Dexter Gordon, that sometimes plays really very laid back, if the drummer doesn't understand how that works and he just tries to be together with Dexter Gordon, then everything would just slow down. That just wouldn't make it. So you have to understand what's going on. And then today, when the music became so complex, that's what sometimes I say with the beginners in rhythm class, when things are not happening and they said, yeah, but my feeling and whatever. And then, yeah, well, but if you play with me, and I mean, I'm sure in 2 quarter notes, I can play something that you just don't know anymore where one is. And it's just then finished. So they have to learn it and they have to understand it. And I think one of the biggest mistakes with most teachers in rhythm sections or band workshops, they talk always about this soloing and accompanying thing, and that's, for me, it's a strange concept that has nothing to do with reality. It's always interplay. It's always interplay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, my opinion on time and who all is in charge, and to what extent the band members are in charge of time and phrasing, is still evolving. But sometimes it's always been frustrating to me as well. Let's say the count off. Who does the count off? Does the drummer do it or somebody else? And first of all, everybody should be able to do the count off. Like, everybody should know where the time is, where the tempo is, and just judging by the count off, you can already tell if somebody's confident or not. Sure. Right? Depending on how you count off, the band's gonna start confidently or not, or they might start confused or something like that. And to me, it just always made sense to tell the one that plays the melody, right? Whether it be a singer or an instrumentalist, to do the count off somehow. Also, when I used to work on ships, I always sat down with the singers and told them, all right, let's go over the tempos. And for some songs, we even talked about the BPM count, to make sure that at least in the beginning it's the same every night, just so that maybe they have a verse that's really, really fast or something, and they only feel comfortable within this range of tempo. And then,
yes, totally.
I mean, the drummer might have the best time in the band, but it that makes no sense to always have just the drummer tell you what time to play a song in, because I mean, many of the things we do sound good, whether it's in 80 p.m. or 90 p.m. BPM, right? But maybe a melody
Well,
just sounds good at 82 BPM, but not anymore at 90 BPM because the melody then sounds rushed or something.
well, I mean, definitely depends with singers and instrumentalists. With singers, a lot of time the problem is also the lyrics. They can't even fit the lyrics in anymore if it's too fast.
Yeah.
But also some melodies, they tend to become a Mickey Mouse trick film kind of music when they're too fast, unless you can play them really, really well. I mean, you know, some of the bebop players, they could play melodies still really well and phrase them nicely and stuff at really fast tempos, but that doesn't work with every song. But one of the things that is very important is that everybody knows the melodies of the tunes. I mean, of course, on a cruise ship, if you have to have a songbook of 500 tunes or something, it might become kind of difficult to memorize all the melodies well. But usually those are songs that
they're mostly pop songs. You know them anyways, you know.
Right. So if you don't know the melody, and that's for the drummers, for whatever instrument, if you don't know the melody of the tune, then you better don't play the tune. Really.
Yeah.
And you know that I force everybody in all my workshops, everybody has to be able to play the melody. Everybody, without reading it. And this is one of the, I mean, it's a very useful tool, but you know, the iReal Book Pro, you know, it's very useful, but the problem is if you don't know the melodies and you just are used to work with the iReal Book, and especially for bass players, it's the worst, because a lot of bass players tend to just take their iReal Book and read those chord charts, and they never ever heard the melody of the tune. And this is, I mean, then just in my workshops, I mean, if you don't know the melody, then we don't play the tune. It's as simple as that. And everybody has to play the melodies and to know them and to memorize them if possible. I mean, if you memorize tunes and then maybe 3 years later you play it again and you have to read it because for whatever situation it is, it doesn't matter so much because you will remember the melody once you have memorized it. But it's in the melody, you know, everything is in the melodies. And if everybody knows the melodies, then this problem doesn't exist so much anymore. But I agree that actually everybody has to be able to count in. You remember this one exercise we do sometimes in rhythm section when we have a pulse and then we leave it open for 4 bars and then somebody has to play a pickup note and we just have to play the one. It's so evident if the guy that plays the pickup note is confident or not, even if it's out of time. But if he plays his note confident, then everybody is together. And if he doesn't play it confident, and that's kind of the same with counting. And I agree, everybody should be able to count. But this ability to think about the melody without hearing it and finding the right time and then count off what you hear and then play the same tempo after the count off and all of that, that's it's not so easy. You have to practice it and you have to get experienced and you have to learn how to do it. But I agree, everybody should be able to count. But what happens a lot of times in bands with experienced musicians, especially if it's a large band, that the band leader or the singer or whoever gives me the time and then I count off. But a lot of times I take the tempo from the guy that or the girl or whoever it is that sings the melody or the sax player or whoever, and he gives me his tempo. And then also one strange thing, and that's for me the left foot. I mean, when somebody gives me a tempo, then it immediately goes to my left foot. And then I have it in my left foot, and long before I start to count, I have it in my body. I have it in my left foot, and then maybe I start to snap it, or if I'm not allowed to make noise for some reason, but usually it doesn't matter, even if in big halls or whatever. Uh, doesn't matter if they hear the audience hears the click, but I I I have it in my left foot, and then I move my hand, and then at some point when I realize that everybody is ready and everybody hears or feels the pulse, then I start to count. Then one mistake that a lot of people do is they don't do this first of all, and then they count in 3 steps. They count like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and
Yeah.
stuff. So I think really this is a mistake. I think everybody should agree that you just do it in two steps. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you start this only when everybody already feels the pulse. And otherwise, it's very difficult to start to play together. And just a little anecdote, I was lucky to be in Los Angeles on the first Buddy Rich Memorial Concert. I was there in the audience when Steve Gadd was there, and Vinny and all the guys. The very first edition of this concert or of this kind of series. And the anecdote is that I remember very well in the second set, it was Dave Weckl starting the second set, and then Vinny came out and played his thing, and then at the end, Steve Gadd. And of course, the band, it was the same band, was the same room, everything. I mean, everything just sounded so much better when Steve Gadd played. Of course, not technically,
Yeah.
but I was just different. And the anecdote is that I mean, this I wasn't in the backstage, but the Weckl after his set, he came back to the green room, and Steve Gadd was sitting in the corner like this, just like this, very concentrated, sitting in the corner. and I mean, it's an anecdote. I wasn't there, and it's not recorded and nothing, but it probably was something like that. And then Weckl asks Steve, so what you're doing here now? And he said, I'm counting off the first song. But that was when Winnie was out there playing, so it took 40 minutes until he had to go out to play his song, his first thing, and he was there like counting himself and the whole band, and half an hour before he even got on stage. And so, yes, that's how it is.
It's crazy. So I have on ships, I played a lot of disco tunes from the 70s. And I always ran into the same issue that those disco tunes usually have a 4-on-the-floor bass drum and a backbeat, right? And during the verses, you have like 8 notes on the hi-hat. And then on the choruses, you have the same beat, only that on the off beats, you open the hi-hat. And somehow I always speed up, and I still do, during that transition. And I wonder if how would you approach that issue where I'm basically playing the same thing, but the bass player always looks at me and says, dude, like, it's not feeling good anymore.
I know all these problems, of course. They happened to me. They happen probably to most of us. I mean, there it's my left foot. I learned because I know a lot of guys don't agree with this, but I learned to play the 8th notes with my left foot with the hi-hat closed and the hi-hat open. When you open it on the offbeat, like in disco music, then you can keep your 8th note. It's easy, and you just open it a little bit. But for your body, it stays the same, exactly the same. It's the thing is that a lot of guys then, because they have to change the movement of the hi-hat to open it, then somehow the time doesn't feel the same. And I remember very well, that's part of the reason why I started to really work on my left foot. And I mean, I know a lot of drummers don't agree with this, but for me, that then did the job, because I can keep exactly the same movement in my whole body, and I just have to let go a little bit so it opens the hi-hat. And then that's it. Also, I mean, a lot of jazz players, I mean, they say, yeah, everything is in your right hand. I only partly agree with this. I mean, even if you play jazz and it's the right cymbal, for me, I mean, the right cymbal is really my voice, the way I speak. But the pulse, the time machine, also in when I play straight ahead jazz, is basically the left foot, and not. I mean, the right cymbal is my voice. I mean, that's my phrasing, my dialect, the way I want to talk to the people. But the time, of course, you have to feel it in your body and your heartbeat. But for me, I mean, that's why also in the old books and even in Latin languages like Italy, in Italian, Spanish, in French, they still call it the Charleston, the hi-hat, the Charlet, Charleston, whatever. And Charleston, as you know, is a city on the east coast of the States. And there was this dance called Charleston, and somehow the hi-hat became so related to this dance, because this 2 and 4 kind of hi-hat thing is what pushed the dancers. And the hi-hat is the time machine. And that's the same in disco music and whatever. And try it once. It's easy to do technically. Once you know how to play the eighth note with your hi-hat, then it's basically just.
Well, maybe I fixed it now already. I haven't played a beat like this in a long time, and I've been practicing a lot with the left foot.
I know.
Yeah. So you're also in charge of auditions at the school in Lucerne, and
yes,
maybe some of the listeners are Googling you and searching you to maybe find out what an audition might look like, and they already know this by just reading through their website. But what do you look for in a drummer when they audition to go study music? Is it their technical abilities, their listening skills?
No,
or
I mean, as you know, technique is is a process, and technique basically everybody can learn. And we don't really look for technique. We look really for the attitude. If somebody is able to learn, if this ego thing that we talked about in the beginning is just way too strong, not that they have to play like me or like other teachers or whatever, but if your ego blocks your learning process, then we know that we will run into problems at some point. So that has a lot to do with the attitude, their desire to learn, and this we see pretty quickly. It's what I say now is really brutal, but actually, in 99% of the cases, you already know when the guy walks in the room and sets up the drums, that just the way he touches the instruments, just, maybe he tunes it a little bit, or just, I mean, of course, we make errors. I mean, that's why I say 99%, or maybe only 95% of the cases. I would say in a couple of seconds, you already know. I mean, just already when they walk into a room, the way they handle the instrument, the way they just, their aura, you already somehow get a lot of information about a person. And then what they really play during the exam is only a small part, really, because I mean they're nervous and some of them, they have played jazz before, and a lot of them today anyway, they have never ever, they have no experience playing jazz. And of course certain ability we need. This is more about if they can somehow succeed in the program, because it goes fast and it's a lot of work, and it's then more, I mean, are they able to play in the repertoire workshop from the beginning, so at least at the band functions and stuff, but that's really basic stuff. And it's a lot of times we recommend, not because they're bad musicians or something, man, I mean, you should get a good teacher and study at least one more year, just because you will not be able to follow the program, because there is just so many issues that you first have to get straight. But that's not, a lot of times that's not even because they're not good musicians or that they won't be good musicians. It's just because once they're in the program, they have to be able to function in the workshops and in all of that. And that's not so much about their abilities really at the moment, but then we have to recommend them to maybe study 1 or 2 more years and try again, because of course if there are workshops and the drummer just can't learn the tune because it's too difficult, or then that's the issue. But most of the times we don't need this hour, really. That hour is really more a respect to the students because they prepare and stuff. But usually, also most of the times, I mean, I know it after 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very interesting. And once they finished school, like after the master studies, what's your goal during the time period that you have with a student? Like, what abilities do you want them to have once they're done?
Well, my ideal would be, of course, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an idealist, so keep my ideals. My ideal idea would be that all of them would be able to do the job. If I get sick or something, if I would have a tour or whatever gig it is, that I can call them and they can do the job. And that would be the ideal. It doesn't always work, of course, but in quite a lot of cases, I think it's of course they will play a little bit different than me and stuff, but that they can just work in whatever situation occurs. And if I somehow cannot do it, I can call them and say, hey, can you go and do the job? And then that's the ideal. It doesn't always work, but that's my goal.
Yeah. All right, Marc, thank you very much. I think you've talked for quite a while. Very, very interesting.
2 hours.
It was a very, very interesting conversation. Maybe there's something you want to say. Otherwise, I'm
Yes,
through with
one thing I want to add. I mean, it can be frustrating. You have to somehow be very dedicated to do this and to become a good musician, not just a good drummer. Or, I mean, this word good is also somehow, it's a bit difficult. But if you get frustrated, think about those moments when music really hit you, when you really felt something very strong. If you get frustrated, try to think about those moments. What happened inside your brain, your body, or wherever that lit this fire? And if the moments are there where you're really hopeless, frustrating, and you want to leave everything, try to remember those moments, because that's where the fire really is. And once you remember those moments, or this one moment, and you keep thinking about this, that definitely helps to go on and pass those frustrating periods that everybody has. That's one problem. We don't like to talk about those frustrations. Everybody wants to be cool and successful and all of that. Everybody has those really tough, frustrating moments. Otherwise, they will never reach an audience, because that's just how it is. And you just have to pass those moments, and you will pass them as long as you remember this energy that you got when this fire got lit. And it definitely helps to pass those frustrating moments and periods, because that's just part of the job. And it's like that. Everybody has it.
Well, it's also that to me was always very, very frustrating. Like, you take a movie like Whiplash.
A stupid movie. I'm sorry to say it. It's such a stupid movie.
It's such a distorted view on what practicing and music and everything really is. Like, before being on stage, you spend hundreds of hours just practicing the same thing for years, and then you have those 2 hours on stage where it seems like it's all glorious and fun, but
maybe that sounds arrogant, but it's really a stupid movie. I don't understand why it became so successful. No, I understand why it became so successful, but I mean, those movies just shouldn't be done in the first place. I'm sorry, but it's just such a stupid movie.
Yeah, because to me, it's mainly because you don't see how much work it actually is, and
it's just stupid from the beginning. I mean, the way his teacher is talking to the guy, then I mean, blood on his fingers. I mean, the only place where a drummer never has a blister or bleeds or something is where they show his hand full of blood, and so it's just badly researched. It's badly done. I'm sorry. It's just complete, but of course it's misleading. When people, that don't understand how it works, they believe that's how it is. I got so many messages, even emails and comments from people that I know. Oh, wow, I didn't know that's like that and stuff. And I just had to tell them, just forget it. That's had nothing to do with the reality.
Yeah, it's frustrating. All right, Marc, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for your time, for your patience with me.
Well, thank you.
I wish you all the best in Madrid, and I hope I get to see you soon.
I hope so too. Very soon we will keep going. Thank you for having me. Thanks for asking me for this, and we're together in this, and continue.
It will be good.